Dave Dempsey. Cheers.
Cheers, Mike.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming on.
Good to be on, I think. Let you know at the end.
You'll love it, I promise.
Okay.
A lot of people usually say that when they come on. And then
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, what's up? This is Mr. David Dempsey. He is a very good friend of mine. He he fathered my best friend who has been on the podcast before.
Not in a weird way.
Not in a weird way, though, Troy. So you guys always hear me talk about Troy on here. This is his father. He's a good friend of mine, too. We're actually co-workers now. I don't know if I should say that or not. But,
You can say that, yeah.
we're-
It was through our relationship that we became co-workers.
that we became
so
coworkers.
It works
yes.
out.
So it did work out, and he has just been a great friend throughout the trajectory of the entire time that I've known Troy and himself.
More steady than great.
Yes, more steady than great, I would say. Helped me with a lot. Helped me with a flat tire. Helped me with computer issues. Helped me
On
with,
Sunday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yes, I was stranded and did not have the proper jack to lift my car up because for some reason GM didn't think that you need a jack that already comes together. They said, hey, here's a build-it-yourself IKEA jack, and we'll just put it in the
They
back.
want you to pay for OnStar.
They do.
It's a global theme. Everybody wants you to get into their system and stay there. So
I hated OnStar. I hated selling it. These were the most miserable people in the entire world when you called, because you would be sitting there with a customer you just sold a brand new car to. You'd have to do the OnStar. You click the OnStar, and the lady would answer, and she'd be like, "Thank you for calling OnStar. My name is so and so. How can I help you?"
Because she hates her job.
She did hate her job.
Of course she does.
And
She just has to do it.
It was horrible customer service.
This is one of the themes lately with things. And I have a great deal of conversation with my boss about why Microsoft took away some feature that used to be widely available for free.
Yes.
9 times out of 10, the reason they take away the feature is because they want you in their cloud.
Yeah.
So they want you to sign in on a cloud account to Windows.
Remember the same thing with
And
Apple.
when people didn't do it, they then started tricking them, and they changed the language when you set up Windows for the first time to make it so that it was really hard to set up a local account.
Okay.
And they hid the things and they moved the things around. So their goal is to put you on a subscription for Windows. And over the last 5 years, they have slowly just kept removing things that you liked and pushing you to the cloud.
To the cloud,
And that's
yeah.
and it's the same thing with OnStar.
Yeah.
And when people try to get you to incentivize you to do what they want, you got to say, am I going to participate in this ecosystem or am I going to not?
Yeah.
But you have to be aware of it. And sometimes you're not unless you've been around long enough in that system to see what they're doing and kind of see where it's
Well, I
headed.
think even just the evolution of what Microsoft has become from what they were. I mean, every computer came with Word and Excel and PowerPoint, and now you have to subscribe to 365.
That's
right?
not entirely accurate, but yeah. The theme is the same. They want you on subscriptions.
Yeah.
They want that income, and they want you. Originally, Microsoft had an issue with people being married to Windows XP for 15 years.
Yeah.
And when they came out with Vista, everybody ignored it.
Well, when did they change that it was a subscription for Word? Because it used to come with it.
You still can buy it like that.
Okay.
What they're doing again is they're incentivizing you towards a behavior pattern that rewards them.
Okay.
Because people would buy Office 2003, and my clients would, and they were professional businesses, and they wouldn't even migrate to, we went to 2003 to 2007, then it was 2010, and they wouldn't migrate up. Even though there was features that were added that other companies were no longer compatible with their version anymore.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't do it.
Oh, I think that's where
'Cause they're
Apple
cheap.
kind of became the king from an early standpoint because they were just like, look, this is our stuff. You're either buying our stuff or you're not.
I'm a longtime Apple hater, but in working in IT for 6 years, I got really a good education on what they do very well.
Yeah.
So I had a client with a $1,500, ridiculous, Thunderbolt monitor.
Jeez.
It was not even made anymore. They
Yeah.
don't make Thunderbolt monitors anymore at that point. And he had a bad power supply. It was humming. And it annoyed him because he was an artiste. So the humming drove him to distraction.
Yes.
So I took it to the Apple store, and they repaired the thing for $43, just the cost of parts. It was out of warranty. The parts were hard to find, whatever. But, if you tried to repair a normal monitor like that,
Yeah.
if you could even get it done, and mostly you couldn't because the parts aren't available.
Yeah.
But, it would be $200, $500 in labor and everything else.
Yeah.
And that's what Apple does well. They take care of people who've invested in their ecosystem. But their ecosystem is unfortunately a gigantic hole you throw money into, and they've incentivized people there.
Yeah.
In that, like the what's the little Apple computer they make? I had one even.
Oh, the
Yeah. See, that's how memorable it is. The Mini.
the iPad Mini
No.
or the laptop.
The Apple Mini. It was a desktop computer that you could get that was just small.
Oh, the little box thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They used to be upgradable. You could take them apart, add more memory, put in an SSD, do whatever you wanted. I loved minis for my brief period of time where I was a Mac guy.
Yeah.
And they started welding in the memory. It was on the board. You couldn't remove it and add to it or whatever. And then they made the SSDs on the board. Couldn't upgrade them. So you had to buy a better Mini or move into their more professional system.
Yeah.
And that's why I hate Apple. But again, incentivizing behavior by removing choices.
Yeah.
They're literally leading the cattle to the gate where they're going to slaughter them.
Yeah.
But they're like, look, cookie. Oh, cookie. Oh, cookie. Windows 10 is free. As if that's a thing.
As if that's a thing. Yeah.
You know?
I think that's the thing with so my first ever like smartphone was a iPhone 6. I think it was a 6. And I was just hooked there, and now as I watched over the 10 years of being an Apple user, at least in the phone, of how my whole life is just in there. And I think that's why it's so hard for me to try and switch over. So many people try to have. I've had Droids before. I don't know. I like the compatibility of Apple. I think it's ease. I think the ease of access is what draws a lot of people in. I love, but as far as like a MacBook, maybe I was just stupid and didn't know how to use it, but like I ended up getting an iPad instead because I just couldn't figure out the MacBook, how I wanted it to correlate, and the language it was trying to use for simple things that I would be able to do on like a HP or a Microsoft.
And the story of that operating system is when it came out, it was truly revolutionary. And Bill Gates just slowly absorbed features.
Yeah.
And then surpassed features.
Yeah.
And if you look at phones, it's the same story.
Yeah.
Apple came out, they had all these features. Well, Android caught up to them eventually.
Yeah.
And then overmatched them. And now it's Apple that's stealing features.
Oh, yeah.
Big screens.
The
Remember
slide
Steve
thing.
Jobs
Yeah.
said, never going to have a screen that's bigger than 3.5 because that's from a sweep with your thumb from the bottom to the right of the screen. And now they don't.
Yeah.
So Apple basically is just running on gas at this point, and security. Because if there was one thing that I admire about iPhones, I know that when the federal government wanted them to crack one open for a very good reason, Apple refused to do it.
Yeah.
Can't have a problem with that. So
No.
I know they're not trying to sell your data to anybody else. They're trying to keep it for themselves.
Yeah.
But still, you
Yeah.
know, so I know that they have a high security level as far as that stuff goes.
Well, you see it in Google, you see it in the different, Amazon and Apple are very similar because they're not trying to sell your information to other outlets. They want to keep it for themselves.
Right.
That's where you have a company like Google where it's been shown multiple times that they're selling your information over and over
Yeah, the whole
again.
point of Google is to monetize you,
Yeah.
basically, to grab you. And the more they've gotten into it, and everybody wonders why Google started making phones and why they kept making phones. They launch all these weird products all the time.
Yeah.
Their whole moonshot thing they did with Internet by Balloon.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, they didn't. Project Loon, I think it was called. So
Project
they had
Loonies.
these
They are
high,
loons.
they had these high altitude balloons that they were deploying in places like Africa that didn't have internet.
Okay.
Why?
Yeah.
Spent money like you wouldn't believe on it. Why? Because they want more data. Because they sell data.
Yeah.
And when they lose interest in something, they run away, which is one of the reasons I'm kind of dropping out of their infrastructure. Is as soon as they're bored with photos or it doesn't make them money, it gets cut. It's ruthless.
Yeah.
So more and more for me, these choices are less about what's cool and exciting, is about why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And a lot of times free stuff ends up costing you a lot more than money.
Yeah.
Who would have thought 10 years ago that our data was valuable?
Yeah.
That people wanted to know where you went. Well, guess what? I drove around as part of my job. Google began to ask me, what did I think about this place that I was near, didn't visit? They thought I did.
Yeah.
You know, and now I ended up being a Google guide just because I started answering questions.
Yeah.
And now I'm constantly getting feedback. These many people looked at your pictures. I'm working for them and they don't even pay me
without working for them.
It's you get caught in these behavior patterns that you just sort of get friended into.
Well, I think that what they really hammered on the social media movement without being a social media platform. They gave you an option to voice your opinion with Google reviews, with the Google pictures, or even if it was a new business that was up on Google and the business didn't have any pictures, you could take pictures of that business. So now not only are you working for Google, but you're also working for that business without seeing a penny of anything.
And then you find out that they're geofencing people.
Yeah.
And I was like, So thematically, these industries have all gotten together. And I mean, when you see those ads on Facebook, your ads on the side pages, Google's informing them.
Yep.
Then you start having an Alexa, which I have. And I have noticed that, I'll say something to my wife, and then later on, something will show up. And at first I thought, I'm being paranoid.
Yeah.
And then I'd say something totally random and not anything connected to anything I'd normally say.
Yeah.
Those things would start to show up. So we're starting to see a little bit of Amazon bleeding into that too.
Well, that's where Amazon, I Googled, 2017. I was looking to get a new guitar, and I just Googled guitar prices, like maybe at Guitar Center or something. And the next thing I have on my Facebook is an Amazon ad for this guitar for so much money. That's when I started. Well, I think I started realizing it maybe like in 2016. Is when it really started showing. And then in 2017, I'm like, oh, it's listening to me.
It starts as a tickle, and then it turns into a cough. And then next thing you know, you're hacking your lungs out. You start to have this feeling like, that was weird. And you're like, well, that's really weird because it keeps happening. And then you're like, this must be happening on purpose. And then you see the curtain gets pulled back, and you see the Wizard of Oz there. Don't look at me.
Yeah. Don't look at me. Look over here. Don't look at what's happening over here.
For me, Amazon is not an evil company. They're a company that basically understands that data is king.
Yeah.
And when they're harvesting my data, I understand it because they want to sell me things.
Yeah.
That's a process I can participate in or not participate in. I'm not being co-opted into it without my consent. Or, if you have an Android phone, you've consented to basically, I mean, if they take boudoir pictures of you, then that's going a little far. But short of that, they're good. Anything you do, they say, and there's ways you can shut it off, but you almost have to take a 5-year course. You could practically go through law school easier than you can figure out how to shut off all these privacy things and all these various segments of electronics.
As a law school dropout, I will say I disagree with that.
I don't take legal advice from law school dropouts. Thank you.
Well, the one thing that has always fascinated me about you is just you're so divvied in all of these different trades, IT, even I would say construction overall. I mean, a lot that has to go into what our job is, and we do flooring and work for a flooring company. So I mean, it's cool to listen to all these different things as we're going through everything. It just seems like you just retain all this awesome information. Now, you were in the Army growing up, and you were not.
No, I wasn't in the Army growing up.
Well, in your 20s.
That's an adult, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry. He was a 5-year-old in the Army waving a banner.
It's funny because when I was a kid, I used to try to entertain people by saying when I was a little boy in the Army.
Yes.
Because my father would always talk about his time in the Army.
Yeah. But you were stationed in Germany.
I was.
For a little bit.
I was stationed in a bunch of places, but that was one of them.
Part of, I think...
Am I throwing you off at all?
No. Part of the amazing part of your story, I think, is how you got to see all these different cultures. And I kind of want to wrap one giant thing into one thing before we get into our next topic.
Okay.
But, so, one, what made you decide to go into the Army? Two, while in the Army, is that where you started to get this... infatuation with like IT, or how did you even get into IT, transferring out of that? Because I know you went from that into like flooring and then into IT, but you were always an IT guy. It fascinated you, I believe.
So, okay, we'll preface this all with this.
Yeah.
I test out pretty highly on the Asperger syndrome scale, which is now the autism scale.
Yes.
And one of my sons is fairly much further than I am, but so yeah. So when things are interesting to me, I'm all in.
Yeah.
I have I can get single tracked very easily into something I'm interested in. As a child, I like to take things apart. Later on, I learned how to put them back together.
Yeah.
if you take enough stuff apart and put it back together, you begin to get a picture overall of what things are like, how they're made, how things interact, cooperate with each other, whatever. That's pretty much the whole story of me right there.
Okay.
I like to take things apart and see how they work.
Yeah.
I like to then make things work that aren't working.
Yeah.
Because that's a secondary function of taking things apart and figuring out how they work.
Yeah.
That developed over time as I've added layers of competence in various areas. They all come together. This is confluence.
Yeah.
So I started out with mechanical things, cars, clocks, Legos, name it. I mean, it's just something, the interaction of objects with each other to form something that does or accomplishes a task has always been interesting to me.
Yeah.
I joined the Army because I was a high school ne'er-do-well, didn't graduate, didn't have a job.
Yeah.
You know, I tried, my brother found me a job the brief time I lived with him, and I was going to be working for General Electric.
Okay.
As a janitor.
As a janitor.
So I got there for my first shift. I was the only person on the crew who spoke English. I was shown a room, given a mop bucket full of water and a mop, and the lady explained to me in very good Spanish, apparently, what I was supposed to do in this room.
Yeah.
And gestured. Okay. She leaves. I go in that room and start mopping it, and it was a wooden board floor, very weird floor.
Yeah.
And it caught one of the wheels on my mop bucket, and I dumped mop water all over this floor, which was the mainframe general computer room for General Electric in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Everyone in the room at that point then started screaming at me at the top of their lungs. No idea. They're throwing papers on the floor. I mean, it's chaos in there.
Yeah.
It turns out that what the lady was explaining to me was never take a bucket of water in that room, because all the cables for all their computer systems are directly under that wooden board floor with big spaces in it. And if you dump water in there, you'll kill the entire computer system.
Yeah.
So anyway, I left that job pretty quick. My brother was interested that I got a job pretty fast, and I happened to be walking by a recruiter, and
Yeah.
I ended up in the Army.
Okay.
I mean, it worked out really good for me.
Yeah.
I needed to learn to be an adult. I had none of the skills that you really needed. And I see people today, and I think everybody struggles with that thing.
Yeah.
High school does not necessarily, or school in general, doesn't necessarily prepare you to be an adult.
Yeah.
They say things like, well, you should go to college, you should do this, you should do that. But the everyday practical stuff of get up in the morning, eat something, get to work. This is how you accomplish your job. This is how you interact with people on your job.
Yeah.
Was missing.
Yeah.
The Army made it really simple because they screamed at you if you did something wrong.
Yeah.
And they ignored you if you did something right. That's good enough.
That's kind of life.
It is, and it fit in with my understanding of life. I grew up with 8 brothers and sisters mostly to a certain point, and when things were going good, everybody was good. When things were going bad stuff was happening. You quickly identified how to make stuff go right.
Yeah.
So, got in the Army. I grew up in the city originally, so I was familiar with ethnicity.
You're originally from Connecticut.
I was in Bridgeport, Connecticut, was where I was born, and then I moved to Worcester, Massachusetts for 2 years. In Bridgeport, I was in a Polish neighborhood, that was by the railroad track. It was traditionally Polish and largely black.
Okay.
So it wasn't a big deal. It was, we were just people together.
It was the environment you grew up in, and
I mean, if you were in a fight with some people, it was because they sucked.
Yeah.
It wasn't because of anything else.
Yeah.
It was just that I didn't know until I was 23 that Jews were an identifiable race. People would say, well, he's a Jew. I'm like, well, how do you know that?
Yeah.
And they start saying all this stuff, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. I just never thought about it. It wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
I moved to Worcester, and we were in a more whitish neighborhood, but it was, kind of all over the place. There was French Canadians. There was all these different people groups, and we all didn't get along because, again, not because of ethnicity, but because they were acting bad or didn't like us or whatever the thing was.
Yeah.
So I got to the Army, and I had sort of a limited idea. After Worcester, I went to New Hampshire, by the way, which was 100% A-grade, white,
Yeah.
New England,
Oh,
everything everybody imagines.
I drove down southern New Hampshire, and I was with a friend, and she was showing me the beaches up there. And we're driving down the shoreline, and I mean, there are mansions, and I mean mansions that are right, on the shoreline that people live in. And she goes, "Oh, these are just their summer homes." I said, "Excuse me, they're summer homes?"
Well, where I grew up was in the middle,
Yeah.
so even more white, but without money.
Yeah.
But reasonable people with really old school thoughts, and I kind of struggled with that for a long time anyway. But you know, it's what it is. So I joined the Army and was suddenly thrown in with people from Mexico, Puerto Rico, Guatemala, and Guam. I mean, people from all over. And that was a little bit different. So I struggle with that a little bit because there's so much different culture coming at you all at once.
Yeah.
That what a lot of people do is they will turtle up.
Yeah.
They will get in their group. I imagine it's a lot like prison.
Yeah.
You find your identity group.
Yep.
And you just close ranks, and that's it.
Well, it's hard, I think. I mean, you even see that in society the beauty that America is that we have all of these different cultures mashing with each other, trying to navigate through life in this country. And I think that you see this, especially where we live in rural Pennsylvania, a very one-set conservative mind that is all, says all, end all for them. And then you drive an hour down to Philadelphia,
and it's all normal.
You're in a just completely different realm of worlds. I think that that's a blessing in some standards, but I also think it's detrimental to some of the way that people would grow up here, or children grow up here, how they would maneuver through society, because it's you're just taught this one way, this one thing, this whole entire time.
It's inherent positional prejudices.
Yeah,
and people, they always take those words bad, but you grow up with a mindset. Yeah. And sometimes that mindset isn't accurate, and you need to recheck it. And when you get enough information, a lot of people will. Yeah. But we all have various prejudices that we, in various I don't like Italian food. Why? Well, I don't like spaghetti. Well, there's a lot more Italian food than spaghetti. I don't know. The ones I have had I didn't like. Yeah. Somebody would want to educate me against that prejudice. Maybe I'm like, okay, that's fine. Yeah. But too much of the time, it's just uncomfortable. Yeah. So we stay with what is comfortable, and that's people right there. I'm going to stick with what I know. It feels better.
I just go with that.
As I joined the Army, and you have this gigantic, and let me say at the time, this is 1980. The Army was not taking the cream of the crop. Basically, if you were walking and talking, they'd let you join. You couldn't be profoundly retarded, but anything north of that was okay. Yeah. And a lot of times people would be in the Army because they did something bad, and the judge would look at them and say, you can either join the Army or you can go to jail. Yeah. So that's the kind of people I was in with. Yeah. And that was an improvement on the people who were there before I got there. Yeah. So I joined this kind of a big mess with a lot of different people in it. And over the years, just got acclimated to the differential of these different groups or whatever, and you negotiate that, and you understand this is the way they are, and that's kind of informative of the rest of your life. There's all these different parts. Yeah. And they each do something different, and they each kind of fit together in a different way. But overall, it kind of informs the whole process that there are different parts and that they all need to kind of find some way to fit together and not become the same thing. Yeah. And that's the thing that probably is more troublesome than anything else, is where we think everybody needs to be like me because I'm right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's where you have to kind of step back. I mean, I know in the Christian faith that we're in, when we talk about the body of Christ, not everybody can be the arms or the hands or the legs. There's different parts that make the body. And I'm looking at this as like a car, and especially with in your workplace, in the Army, in any general setting where you have more than just yourself, you have to figure out who is the engine, who is the gears, in the engine, who is the exhaust pipe, what is making the whole car come together that is a car that you can drive off and make it work together.
I think that the concept of there being a single thing is at the heart of the problem. And, I had some issues with this myself. I was working for a place, doesn't exist anymore, called Country Floor Store when I first moved here. And we took this test called the DISC test, where they more or less identify your personality traits naturally and at your job. So, and I kind of learned that, you know, for this person who I don't like, it's because he has this kind of personality and this is his needs. He needs something to be very cut and dried. He needs something black and white. He needs all the numbers to line up, whatever. As you start identifying that, you know, one truth doesn't fit for everybody.
Yeah.
Not because it's not the truth, but because people have different things that make them happy.
Yeah.
People have different things that fulfill their basic need for order in the universe.
Yeah.
So in the church, in particular, people want different things out of it. People put different things into it. It's just a question of the blend and recognizing that you don't have the truth as far as, you know, a lot of things that other people are going to believe.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that belief changes. It means that it impacts different people in different ways.
Yeah.
I think.
No, I mean, you look at, I mean, if you just look at society in general and where we've come, you know, I'm only 29 years old, and the amount of changes that I've seen in 29 years is absolutely crazy to me. Things that, like, when I was growing up, I'm like, this could never happen, or this could never happen, and now here we are, and it's happening. And I feel like, especially with technology, especially with the technological advances, I mean, I like to call my kind of group of people that were born between, I'd say, like 88 and 95, that we were like the test period generation for all this stuff. I mean, I remember the car phone to the big block phone to the first flip phones, slide phones, and then the big Mac computers that were just a monitor and then the computer in, and then it just kept evolving, and now I have a whole entire computer system within the palm of my hands to literally get any amount of information that I want to, which I've seen, at least in my life, how it has helped and damaged people. I think it's opened a lot of people up to explore more of the world, to understand that this one mindset that you have isn't the only mindset out there, and that there's other ways that other people do things. I also think that it's been dangerous at that I literally have every amount of information almost in history at the palm of my hand that I can just go to. And you gotta look, the whole fact-checking thing that's been going on, everything like that, I could care less. If somebody wants to fact-check about something, then go ahead. But I also think that can be dangerous in a sense, because who's the person that's fact-checking, and is the thing that they're fact-checking, was that written by somebody that was fabricating? In a larger
context, what is fact anymore?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you have to actually become an expert at drilling down to the truth. And so many times we see stuff on the internet and it's like, well, this is true.
Yeah.
You start digging a little bit. Well, not really.
That's not that true.
Data gets spun in so many different directions. But to what you said, probably equal to the automobile in terms of the way it changed lives.
Yeah.
And I can't think of anything between the automobile and computers that really did that. Some people would say television, and I'd say television was close.
Yeah.
But from in my childhood, and the interesting thing, okay, so perspective. I'm looking across this table from you. You're looking at, you know, the other side.
I've used this analogy on here before.
We each have a different perspective.
Yeah.
I'm 60 years old. I was born in 1961. I'm baked in the 60s.
Yeah.
I don't mean I'm stoned in the 60s. I mean,
he was made in the 60s.
That's where my personality was formed, was from the 60s. And my brother was a hippie at the time. When I was out, he taught me how to look for police car tail lights when I was out with him putting up communist posters in downtown Worcester.
Yeah.
It was a different time.
Yeah.
The things we saw this summer, for me, remind me the most of those people, those hippies, who just put it all on the line and went out there and said, this is what we believe in, and you can reject us, throw us in jail. It was the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
They got beat a little more.
Yeah.
Not tear gassed as much, though. I will say that. They've got their tear gas game on lately.
Yeah.
But I was so proud of people I went to school with. I know a guy, he went to my school, and he's been posting from Florida all last year. And he was out there doing his thing. I mean, and they were getting shot down by police, and not shot, but, you know, they were getting stopped by police and tear gassed in the whole 9 yards. That is as close as I've seen to what they were doing in the 60s. It was just standing up and saying, I don't care who you are, this is wrong. It's the wrong thing to do. You're doing something bad.
Yeah.
And trying to do something about it.
Yeah.
And I think they had an effect. But the biggest thing perspective-wise that you see is, okay, boomer is a big phrase right now. People from my generation have a mindset. And when we saw it in the people from, the older people in the 60s, it's the same mindset. You're running around without bras. You believe in free love. You're taking drugs. So they grew up in their mindset, and they didn't even understand what young people were trying to say because they didn't have the same belief in what the world was and how it operated.
Yeah.
Were those young people wrong? Some stuff they were wrong, but mostly, no, they were right.
Yeah.
But
well, you could even say that about the generation before them, though.
I think generationally, that's what happens. Is that you don't speak the language.
Yeah.
So now I'm listening to a lot of things and seeing a lot of things that I don't speak that language.
Yeah.
Gender fluidity. There's a bunch of stuff that for me, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't speak that language.
Yeah.
And we're always going to hop from generation to generation. And then, in 15 years, you're going to be looking back saying, what are you guys talking about? This is ridiculous.
I think you saw that, at least in my generation, with the legalize movement for marijuana, because it had been so big in the 60s and the 70s of trying to get this done and not even realizing what they had banned at the time. And I mean, we can go on and on about all that and how that happened. But I think for us, my generation, at least the weed smoking generation, that it wasn't a movement like the hippie generation was. It was just, I'm just smoking weed casually. And I think that happened with a lot of the music influence that had happened over the time. I mean, you can see the influence all the way back from the 40s up until now of what it had in there.
I can tell you with absolute surety that more people were smoking weed in the 70s than probably are today.
I guarantee it. I think there's more people now, though, that...
It wasn't as good, though.
Really? I think there's more people now, though, that realize the medical benefit of it, that are trying to finally get this, look, we need to stop being so harsh and just let this thing go through.
And that is the power of the internet.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest things why it changed everything. I saw it with satellite TV. Satellite TV came around, and everybody starts watching these programs from all over the country and whatever, and accents start to get lost.
Yeah.
People start to move into this culture where they're watching other people who don't have that accent.
Yeah.
And that is information.
Yeah.
It neutralizes the differences because you all are seeing the same information and you're all kind of forming the same conclusions. I know that you see why marijuana became such a big project, where everybody was like really against it, and you start looking at the roots of it.
Yeah.
And a way to separate yourself from, cultures that you were uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
And then demonize it, say, oh, these people, you know.
Yep.
And then you look at it and you realize that we live in Pennsylvania, a state that will sell you something that is so potent and so deadly that it will kill you if you drink the whole bottle they're selling you.
Yeah.
Can't buy weed, though. That's bad.
Yeah.
So, that's that kind of weird dichotomy there that makes you say, who invented these rules?
Yeah.
Why do they make sense?
Yeah.
And I think that's what the internet gives you. It gives you a place for people that are like-minded to gather together, and then that influence will grow if the idea will grow with it. It also brings you a lot of idiots who want to blow up stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a medium for growing ideas.
Yeah.
All ideas are not good to me.
No.
If you're one of those idiots, you think it's great because you finally found 5 idiots just like you.
Yeah.
But I see this in what my wife does.
Mm.
She was completely isolated in her various belief systems.
Yeah.
And now she's not.
Yeah.
Because the internet.
Yeah.
The internet connects the planet instantly. And when I was a kid, that was the weirdest thing. I was on a party line. We're lucky if you get a phone call just for yourself without somebody else dialing in.
Yeah.
Now we can just talk to people in Australia.
Yeah.
And
not just talk to them. We can do like a video call with them. We can see all these crazy things that are happening. It's really weird to me. Sorry, I wanted to check and make sure that was on there.
Yeah. It's a basic change in life, and that's why for me, it might be bigger than the automobile.
Yeah.
The automobile allowed us to see more, to get out of our communities, to take a wider scope in our daily lives and not make it like, oh, we're going to take a trip to Lancaster. That's a day trip.
Yeah.
Now we go there in 20 minutes and shop for 10 and come back.
Yeah.
it has expanded our circle of things we can see and the things we're exposed to.
Yeah.
And the internet did that on a global scale.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a kid, you'd watch the news. It would be at 6 o'clock at night. It would be on one of the 3 channels you got. And they would say, something terrible happened today. Film at 11.
Yeah.
That's all you'd know.
Yeah.
Now, we see the horror being wrought across the globe
Yeah.
in film because everybody's got a cell phone
Yep.
on a daily basis. That's depressing.
Yeah.
So it brings you information. And I think the biggest thing that your generation probably suffered from is the knowledge of being able to shut the thing off. When do I stop getting all of this in my head? When do I stop?
Well, I think it goes back to understanding the context of the situation, too. Now that we have all of these people recording and everything, we don't know when they started recording. We don't know at what point they started recording. We're just seeing all this bad stuff happening. We don't know how we got there. Now, it's bad stuff. I'm not trying to downplay any of that or anything, but what exactly is fueling this? And then you have the powers of, mainstream media that will twist some of these stories, because we had this conversation before too, where we check each and every single one of the news platforms. I mean, everywhere at least, and they don't seem to be on the same page. And I think it's because of an agenda, and not an agenda and a conspiracy agenda. I mean, an agenda of make your money, and how do you make your money? Some of it's in shock factor, and then when you try to tell some truths through that shock factor, well, at least for me, how do I navigate through what you're trying to say right now, especially on mainstream media that is truth, especially when you go around and you change your mind almost every week on one subject, and then the next week you're just gung-ho on it again.
Yeah, I do see a trend for platforms, CNN in particular, reacting to the coronavirus in particular in a way that seems tilted. Clearly these outlets have a listenership that they are 100% into keeping. So the narrative gets tilted. Again, I think it goes back to trying to drive people into behaviors.
Yeah.
So they're not going to move off of their thing to drive their audience away. So they find those themes and they pound on them.
Yeah.
Fox News struggled with this, I think, mightily. If you watch them in the aftermath of the attacks on the Capitol, they were very different all of a sudden.
They had a very how do I want to put this, mono type of look at it, I guess. Like everything simmered down.
I think it corrected them when they realized that, like, okay, we let this go too far.
They came back to reality.
Yeah, and they left it again.
Yeah,
it was a temporary thing,
and
that's fine because they need to keep their audience. So for us, I think, with all these choices and all this way of getting information, and some of it's just too tailored to the way you already think.
Well, I think that we can come to an agreement that CNN is very left and Fox is very right.
Yeah, I guess I'll go there.
From what I look at, that just seems how they at least separate themselves.
I would say CNN's not terribly left, but that's probably me feeling like I'm not terribly left.
Yeah.
And I was a staunch Republican, very conservative most of my life.
Yeah.
And I've transformed in the last probably 10 years.
Transformers.
Well, the thing is,
Dave in disguise. Go ahead.
More or less, for me, I started looking at government. What is the function of government?
Yeah.
I started reading the Constitution. More importantly, though, I read the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
And I read it every 4th of July. Didn't start till fairly recently. It really changed the way I looked at everything in life. I looked at that and I said, okay, what was the intention of the government here?
Yeah.
And then what did they say about it? And government's job is to, help the people.
Yeah.
So it turned me from a conservative point of view more towards a liberal point of view, because if the government is to serve the better of the people, then, sometimes we're doing things in the conservative section that are more profitable towards corporations, thinking, well, corporations will take care of people. They don't.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of that changed. So if you look at the health of American corporations, you begin to understand why you can't serve them.
Yes.
Because they're in trouble themselves.
Yeah.
My personal belief is it has a lot to do with the bottom line for them, which is stockholders.
Okay.
When I was a young person, it was generally understood the way it traditionally happened was you'd buy a stock and you'd keep it for life, and it would pay you dividends. That's why Monopoly has collect dividends in it, because that's what you used to acquire a stock for.
Yeah.
You'd get an AT&T.
Yeah.
Their goal at the time as a company was to post a big enough profit so that you'd collect a dividend, and then you were happy. That's what you got the stock for.
Yeah.
People now buy stocks for them to gain value. Basic change in the company.
Yeah.
They need growth.
Yeah.
Because without growth, they don't get more stockholders. And
Yeah.
the stock price doesn't go up, and you don't have a value because all you're looking to do is to acquire at this dollar and sell it for this much more dollar.
Yeah.
We're not investing in companies to keep them.
Yeah.
We're investing in companies for them to create more growth in the stock, not in the company.
Yeah.
So the Home Depot must continually work on getting their stock price higher. This causes companies to make cheaper products, worse products.
Yeah.
It in general has dumbed down American companies to the point where they're not,
It's a simple formula that they go on now. We need more volume in order for us to make more money. But what we're going to do to get more volume is cut down half of what we have in price, at least, to get that volume.
The concept that we've made enough money is gone.
Yeah.
It's not, we can't just stay at this level. We're super profitable right here.
Yeah.
We don't need to get bigger. We don't need to change. We're super profitable right where we are, and people are getting their dividends.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs, famous for not paying dividends at Apple.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know, because he's Steve Jobs. He did things the way he wanted to. But that's a huge part of that whole thing is that, you only keep Apple stock because it's going to get crazy high. And when it stopped, they got in a lot of trouble right there.
Yeah.
The fact that they had like trillions of dollars sitting offshore, another problem,
Yeah.
kept them alive.
Yeah.
They made it through there. They can buy back all of their stock pretty much with cash on hand because they're Apple.
Yeah.
And Steve Jobs was brilliant, but he had some blind spots there. And his company worked different than his stock did for some reason.
Yeah.
His company was based on long-term value in their products and then, their mindset. So
What was well, I guess going back to what you said, reading the Declaration of Independence, it kind of gave you a clearer mind towards these things and looking into some of these things too. And we were talking a little bit before we started the podcast kind of about that. But the one thing that I wanted to talk to you about was kind of this new perspective or this thing you're going through with this look on life, because I know you're not a religious person, say quote unquote, but you're very well versed in the Bible. And there was a couple times where I had given the sermon at church where, one, I appreciate you so much for coming. It did mean a lot to me. And you are not a man who will admit to compliments very much. And I wasn't even taking it as a compliment, as I call them Davisms, of when you said, hey, you did a great job. And knowing that coming from you was like a validation towards me of like, okay, that meant a lot. Now, you would think it'd be an opposite way around with somebody in the church it'd be more validating with. And the reason it's not is because I know what you complimented me on and saying, like, you stuck to this, you stuck to the point, you stuck to where you were, and that's what needs to happen.
It was a critique, not a compliment.
Yes.
It was an assessment of your performance. If it was bad, I would probably just say, well, it's nice that you did it.
Well, it was still a compliment to me.
But the whole point was it was impactful.
Yeah.
And for me, if you get elected to go up there and talk, and anybody else could say something, like the whole point in having somebody speak to other people is because it's impactful.
Yeah.
In a situation like that, in that setting.
Yeah.
And I just like that you didn't go churchy with it. I appreciated that.
Yeah.
I call it cookie cutter theology or ransom note theology, where you have a theme you're going to build on because you already have this idea.
Yeah.
So you didn't go to the Bible, read something, and get an idea.
Yeah.
You already had your own idea, and you literally just cut and pasted verses from various things to put it together to make it work with your theme.
Yeah.
I mean, that's backwards.
Yeah.
That's arriving at a conclusion and then finding the hypothesis that fits.
Yeah.
So I like that you just read straight up
Yeah.
one section altogether,
Yeah.
and then commented on what you thought it meant.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
That's the way it should be done.
Well, that was where I always disagreed with church sermons and sermons in general. I didn't understand, especially growing up, why are we reading one verse out of this book and then jumping to another book where it supposedly says the same thing, and then keep jumping around, and it's to fit a theme in which somebody wants to get their point across and how it fits with their narrative, and we're not understanding the context of what is actually being said in that book. And I don't think this is just with the Bible. I think this is with anything that you come at with life. Of context is very key and very core. And if, like, when I'm reading just a regular book, just a story book,
Right.
okay, I am not the author. Now, the author has to do the best that he can to explain to me his thought patterns in his context without giving away the full story at once.
Right.
And that's something I always appreciated about writing and writing in general, of how an author is very, I mean, you can definitely tell the really bad authors from the really good authors on the way that they explain things without explaining things. And I think that a lot of that has to do with where we are in our context of, at least in the Christian faith, of with the Bible. You know, we've heard these stories over and over and over and over and over again. And if you look at them as just that, and that's all that it is, well, that's all that it'll ever be. And you're not really grasping the core of what that author at that time was trying to relay to somebody.
Sure. It goes back to that confluence theme again.
Yeah.
So now we have a generation that's running church.
Yes.
That's back from you guys, and their understanding of what church is informs everything they do.
Yeah.
And it's a power structure that makes sure that that's the people who are running the church. Then you have this generation under them, and we think you're flighty and changeable and all, and you are. But now you're beginning to see, along with these ideas they present, all the alternatives.
Yeah.
And you realize that people this isn't church from the time of 2000 BC or, you know, that church is something they invented, because it wasn't what they were doing before their generation, and it wasn't what they were doing before their generation. So you're more or less seeing that we have more information than you do. And yeah, we're not impressed with Strong's Concordance, because we can go on the internet and look that up 18 different ways.
Yeah.
But it makes the foundation of your religion a very slippery, sandy place unless you go back to the document. And that's under debate, because now, you know, the King James Version was changed a lot.
To write a lot of Jewish
They've
culture out.
neutralized the Jewish out of it, down to the names. The renaming of people is probably the biggest one, where it's like, nope, those names aren't going to do.
Yeah.
And they changed all their names.
Well, that's where we were reading Esther a couple weeks back all together. And, you know, I have the new King James Version, and someone had the ESV, someone had the NLV, yada, yada.
Right.
There were literally 3 different sets of names in each of there. Now, like, for me, like, looking at Bible, like, I love looking at Christian history and kind of like seeing how everything came about. And that was one thing I did discover with the King James Version, of the name change and kind of canceling out the Jewish culture. But the problem is the King James is like the closest to what the original Hebrew translation and the original Greek translation were, with the changing of the names and the events and the things. So now it's hard to kind of navigate when I'm reading an ESV versus the King James, because I'm like,
the steady ground of truth has become wobbly.
Yeah.
The story of the Garden of Gethsemane, they come to get him. They said, we're looking for this guy.
Yeah.
And he says, I am he. And they all fall to the ground. And you're like, okay. The actual translation is, he says, I am. And it's the same I am that when Moses asked who God was, he said, I am. That's the I am he used in the garden. That's why they fell to the ground. Because that I am is a different, you can't get the exact meaning just by saying the English words.
Yeah.
But they added the he.
Yeah.
For what reason? Don't know.
Yeah.
When the facts are changeable, and when they're not interpreted always the same way, because the language has been changed. You know, the original Hebrew had vowels missing, and there's just things that they don't quite understand about the way they meant things.
Yeah.
Where's your truth?
Yeah.
Where's the basis for your truth? I say to my wife, the only basis for truth I see is, you got 2 versions of, the beginning in Genesis, and they're both different from each other.
Yeah.
So, okay, clearly that's sort of a general idea. There's parts later that are fairly specific.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm going to take my religion from Yeshua, if I'm going to take one, because he said, just came from God. He tells me what to say. He tells me what to do. I don't do anything he doesn't tell me to do, and this is how you should relate to him.
Yeah.
That's the only part that's not debatable.
Yeah.
That part is 100% right there, like he said it. And for me, he was pretty clear about it's really simple. And anybody who tries to make it complicated is an idiot.
Yeah.
He said it a bunch of different times.
Yeah.
When he wanted to speak about something that was a general overarching theme, he used a parable.
Yeah.
And many parables in there.
Yeah.
When he wanted to speak to something very specifically, he used really direct words.
Yeah.
And we parse those words like they're these other Old Testament words that the meaning might be lost. The meaning's not lost in his words. They're very clear, and he said so himself. So for me, that's what I'd base my religion on. If you read the Bible and create a religion from it, just by reading it, nothing else, no preconceptions, you read the Bible, here's my religion, it would not resemble modern Christianity at all, I don't think. I just, there's so many things we do just because that's, what we grew up in that we later rejected. And then what we created from that, those are just reactions to reactions to reactions. From what? From the original split from the Catholic Church, they didn't have it right. They admit they didn't have it right. They're admitting it still to this day. They'll be admitting it tomorrow. But they basically said, we know, the Sabbath's on a different day, but hey, we're Catholic. So, and nothing against Catholics. I'm just saying that all religion is some kind of an interpretation that got filtered through generations of people who wanted it their way. And yours is nothing different. And so now your generation has the internet. Why don't y'all just meet on the internet? I don't know. We're pretty close. I think the pandemic has moved people into a remote lifestyle more than it was already doing. And it was already doing it pretty good. One of my children has friends all around the world that he talks to every day. They're probably better friends than I have in some cases. I don't collect friends like trinkets or something. Very few of them. They're good friends, and that's it. And I'm not worried about what my collection looks like or growing it or anything. But there's a person who found like-minded people who he could get along with and is happy talking to every day, and he does. And that's a relationship that's just as valid as any relationship I've ever had.
Well, I think that is where, I'm kind of, I actually met with our pastor this morning. I was kind of telling him where I was at least, and I love that man because he is willing to accept and just listen, even if he doesn't understand. And that's what I've needed over these past couple of months, is because I've always been in that place of where I know, at least for me and my personal beliefs, because I've studied everything. I've studied Hinduism, I studied Buddhism, I've studied Zen, I've studied Muslim. All types of different religions throughout the world I've come to, and after I went through all of that, I know the Jewish God and the Jewish Jesus are it, the way, as Yeshua would preach. It's the Christianity that I have the issue with. And talking to him this morning was so refreshing because, look, even if Christians are wrong in the way that they are doing this thing, that shouldn't change my perspective on what Jesus said, and that is love the Lord your God with all of your heart first and foremost, and then love your neighbor as you love yourself. Right. And that's kind of what I base my, religion off of, is just that, what he said there, and then try to fill in the rest of the pieces. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not sure, and I'm not going to try and fight myself on that to the point of where it's tearing me apart that I don't even know what's truth anymore.
He's in the Bible is recognized as having known the scriptures, but not turning them into something of great interpretation. They say what they say. And when he deals with the Pharisees, he doesn't have a very good attitude towards them. Those who parse words and say, make rules from them and say, well, it says this, so you got to do this. And he pretty much was straightforward about how he felt about that. And he said what he said about the first 2 commandments and the rest being hung on them. What does hung on them mean?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't mean anything except they count on those ones. Everything else comes after that.
Yeah.
So step 1 and step 2. Should you do step 3? I guess, but
Yeah.
the idea that somebody telling you these are our rules as a church, like if you're a church, then you don't have any other rules than what your boss laid out for you, and he was very clear.
Yeah, and very specific on what that is.
And there's the thing, and that's why for me, it's like, what did you add?
Yeah.
That should be just it, you know. This is this, and we added this, this, and this, and this because that's how we feel.
Yeah.
But then everybody's religion's the same, and that's no fun because you can't identify who's not in your group, you know.
So what are you getting out of perspective-wise with this new, I don't want to say new mindset, but some of these realizations that you've come to?
I got to watch a shift that's probably not due to happen. I don't know. I can't imagine it happening, but it'll happen again.
Keep explaining your shift. I'll be right back.
Okay. So 1960, it was record players, and you know everybody was looking to have 2 automobiles, and you had 1 television. If you were lucky, it was color, and you got 3-4 channels, and the news would come on, and you'd get the news they told you, and you'd ignore it, and then you know that would be it. These days, you get anything you want from anywhere you want. That changes people. It's a life-altering reality when your education is whatever you decide you're interested in. That's never been available before. When I was in high school, I took power mechanics. They had these video machines, and you'd put in a tape on your current lesson, and they would walk you through taking apart a lawnmower engine, whatever, and then you'd do it. It was huge because it taught you a skill that you wouldn't have been able to learn on your own. If they'd have just given you a lawnmower engine, you probably would have destroyed it several times without realizing you were doing stuff wrong. They walk you through it step by step with video instruction. When I joined the Army, I had, you know, drill sergeants and other cadre there who would train you in something like disassembling your weapon and reassembling it in under 20 seconds. And then you would practice it, but somebody would show you. Yeah, I mean, when I want to put a PBX up and I forgot how to do it, I can just go look up videos on YouTube, and if there's not 10, there's 50. And yes, some of them will do it differently, and that's great too. So I have the instruction of the entire world is at my feet today. That, if you took that back to 1965 and say, any subject you want to learn, I can have you learn, taught on video, which would be weird by itself, didn't exist.
Yeah.
You know, anything, name it, somebody's done it, and I can show it to you, and they can walk you through the steps. Priceless.
Yeah.
Everybody has that,
Yeah.
and they still can't spell. I mean, it's just, it's huge. The things that we thought were going to be important in the 60s were moving sidewalks for some reason, and flying cars.
Yeah.
The 2 dumbest things ever. Everybody's have nuclear power. Okay, that didn't work out.
Yeah.
The things that we got instead, I mean, Star Trek, Mr. Computer, you know, bang, you got what you want.
Yeah.
Instant communication.
Yeah.
Cell phones, and I didn't pay attention to cell phones enough when I was first saying this, but that's part of that confluence.
Yeah.
So we started out with a computing platform. And that gave us the ability to process information.
Yeah.
That thing got smart, and it integrated more kinds of information, audio first, and then a lot of complex video, and it was standalone. And then the internet came along, and that was the part where things got kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And the internet built, and it built, and it built, and you get platforms like YouTube, which even though it's a Google, you know, project, they've kept with it.
Yeah.
And they've monetized it now, so we're safe.
Yeah.
And we've gotten used to that whole theme of exchanging information from video and audio. And again, you know, 75% trash, 25% gold.
Yeah.
I had a Jeep that had a bad viscous coupler. Didn't know that. I just know it wouldn't go when I put it in gear right away. Went on YouTube. Yep. After about half an hour watching, figured out it was a bad viscous coupler. And then found out how to change it with everything still in the car from a guy in Sweden speaking Swedish.
Yeah.
But I could watch him.
Yep.
Dude took a mirror and put some Velcro on the back and stuck it to the top of the transmission tunnel, and then reverse popped out a coupling that you'd never see, never know, with dental picks.
Huh.
You know, and even though I couldn't speak his language, he was good enough with his video. I changed my viscous coupler without dropping all of that stuff, which would have taken me days. That's what you can do now.
Yeah.
You know, I forgot how to put a PBX together. It's been 4 yeyears. Pop. 3 videos later, I have it up and running better than I had 4 years ago.
Yeah.
That's what the internet can do.
Yeah.
It's this priceless asset that is a contribution. And that's the other part of it. That the best stuff on the internet doesn't cost money. It's free.
Yeah.
As long as the platform's available, and that's YouTube.
Yeah.
But people are giving us this knowledge that they've done because they like self-promotion.
Yeah.
That's the nature of people too, but sometimes just to be helpful. But there it is. That hasn't existed. I mean, when I was a kid, you're on your own.
Yeah.
I took my grandfather's car apart and could not figure out how to put it back together.
Yeah.
I wasn't as advanced as I should have been before I took it apart. And he had to pay the neighbor like $100, which was just a lifetime money there. And he was quite angry about it.
Yeah.
Part of my process.
Yeah.
Failure is part of success. And that was some of my worst failures taught me, okay, number those wires when you take them off, dummy.
Yeah.
Things like that. We're taught that failure is bad and success is wonderful. Failure is a process of elimination that you kind of need to go through and say, okay, what I have learned in my life is to look at failure and don't beat yourself up about it. Say, this is what went wrong. Just be totally cold-blooded.
Yeah.
This is what went wrong in my process.
Yeah.
I was lazy. Okay, maybe. I didn't take notes. Maybe.
Yeah.
Or I didn't recognize the issue. Maybe.
Yeah.
Identify that and say, how does it not happen again?
Yeah.
And see if you can develop habits
Yeah.
that do that. And my work life is informed by that now. You know, what went wrong here? How do we stop that from happening?
Yeah.
You know, is there a process we can invent that will check us along the way?
Yeah.
And it's part of that confluence of all the different things that have happened to me and the different disciplines I've gone through, which are all the same thing.
Yeah.
It's all how things are put together and how they work. And IT and flooring are very closely related. They're both complicated. People want them to be simple. Well, I turn on my computer, it comes on.
Yeah.
If you knew all the stuff that has to happen for your computer to
Just
come
for
on,
that to come on. Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
I dug my way to the bottom of that process, and in the end, I realized it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I have years and years and years and years of knowledge that I took computers apart at my kitchen table till 2 o'clock in the morning playing around with stuff. Useless. Doesn't matter anymore. Technology swept all the old away, and it's all new now.
Yeah.
And I eventually looked at the new and said, yeah, I'm not going to bother.
Yeah.
What I need to know is the things I'm interested in, I'll learn those things.
Yeah.
Everything else is too much.
Yeah.
So, you know, no, I'm not going to bother with session border controllers. And there's a lot of stuff I'm not going to get involved in.
Yeah.
And that's the other part of today that's different. When you have that much information, you have to say, this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to ignore.
Yeah.
And that's thematic with Facebook or Instagram or anything.
Yeah.
What do I want to do, and how's it going to impact my life? And if it impacts my life in a negative way, where's the line?
Where's the line drawn?
Where's the line is probably the biggest thing I think everybody struggles with now. And that's the thing your generation probably got.
Well, I think
worst
that's the
damage from.
thing with failure. When you say that, you know, we always look at failure as a bad thing. I just watched a interview yesterday with Elon Musk. He was talking about Tesla and SpaceX and everything and how he got there. And, you know, he said, I've failed miserably my entire life, and he's like, it hasn't been until recently that I've seen success of my failure. And he's like, now I'm getting scared, and I hope I fail again soon so that I can keep learning and developing.
Just not on the way to Mars.
The best not on the way to Mars, please, Elon. Let's let's figure that out. Go ahead. And so I feel like that was probably around the time where I was watching, I think his 10 most what am I trying to say? Best practices to put in, like when starting a business and what you can do to start that business. So it's been quite interesting with Elon Musk to hear how he has developed, because he was in this interview, he was talking a lot about the failures and how much failure motivated him. And at least for myself, growing up, I knew failure was something that I didn't want to happen. And that even trickles over to right now where I am in life, starting the new job with Dave. It's just like, I have to succeed at this. I don't have any room to fail in this. And I think that sets a lot of us up for something that we're not prepared for. It sets up a lot of disappointment. It sets up a lot of we've created this kind of, I think, mindset that if I fail, it's all over, and that I have to succeed. And then if we don't succeed at a good portion of that, we'll never be able to do anything like that again. And that's not true. I've failed. And even in something simple, I've failed multiple times with learning how to play the guitar. And my dad is an amazing guitar player. And all I ever wanted to do was just be able to play guitar how, like he, well, not exactly how he could, just because I have a different taste. He's more electric guitar, I'm more acoustic guitar. But even in that, I noticed that when I started failing, I gave up. And that's not really the smartest way to keep rolling with something, especially that you're passionate about or something that you want to do. So I guess the theme of that story was the failure portion, and then even when you were mentioning earlier with like the people on YouTube that just want to do it out of the good of their heart. There's one guy I came across. He calls himself something Dad, but he basically his whole channel is devoted to teaching mainly young boys that grew up without a father figure how to change a tire or things like that through his YouTube channel. You know, he doesn't ask for any monetization or profits or anything. Right. He just wants to help people, which I think's been really nice. What's that?
Not making any noise? Okay.
No, you're good. Now you made noise.
Sorry.
Now the whole thing's ruined.
Back to Elon Musk.
Yeah.
A guy that I admire and don't like.
Yeah.
But probably going to end up being a generational giant.
Yeah.
You know, probably close to the level that we put Edison in.
Yeah.
When this guy identifies a technology, and I don't think he invents anything, but he identifies things and he strongly goes to the target.
Yeah.
Electric cars are only a thing because Teslas were sexy.
Yep.
He understood that.
Yeah.
Ludicrous mode.
Yeah.
Didn't accomplish anything.
No.
But you know what?
But you know what?
All those muscle heads out there like me who love gas engines now know that every car they put together can be smoked by a Model D.
Yep.
It's just, you know, so now all of a sudden electric cars are cool. And that's going to be the next chain part that gets linked together. It is going to be where, but he pushed that. He made that happen.
Yeah.
Here's a guy that when he wanted to show Jay Leno his new fancy truck, he took him down to a tunnel that his boring company, I don't think he didn't understand that double entendre, a tunnel that they made under Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So the dude has Hyperloop.
Yep.
Started the boring company so he can make the tunnels to put his Hyperloop in to take him to his Mars SpaceX launch in a Tesla.
Yep.
It's how many things that are going to impact our future were maybe not invented by him, but founded and forwarded by him.
Yeah.
A tremendous amount.
A lot.
He probably got just as many bad qualities as good, but he definitely understands how to move in a direction, and he's made the entire American automobile industry move in a direction.
Well, his ideas are out of this world and yet so comparable, I think, to the point of where you can actually make it happen. Do you think we can colonize Mars in the next 100 years?
I don't care about Mars.
Okay.
I don't care about Mars the slightest. I care about the moon.
Yeah.
Tremendously.
Can we colonize the moon?
The moon is the defensive advantage.
Yeah.
Mars is just a planet that's really far away that we're excited about, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
We're not running out of resources. The planet population is going down.
Well, is it him that is doing the
Yeah, he wants Mars.
Well, no, not just that. The space hotel thing. They were talking about a big space hotel being put up.
It fits in with his plan to basically.
I don't know if that's him though.
Thing.
It's got to be though.
I grew up in the '60s. It was a big deal to get to the moon. We got there. It was full of rocks. We gave up after a while.
Yeah.
For me, as much as I like to laugh at the Space Force, making sure that our global communication system stays operational.
Yeah.
It is a known thing. Well, I say it's a known thing, but I can't tell you where it's from.
Yeah.
But there was a Russian satellite that was actually seen re-trajectorying and following one of our satellites. And they think it's a hunter-killer. And that it was a test to track. And then intercept one of our satellites. So that's like the next level stuff that we're going to get.
Yeah.
And between Russia now and China has a very large
Well,
space
I think,
program.
and not to, I mean, not to get political, because I really don't have any political opinions. I mean, you know this. I kind of falter in a neutral zone, but I think that was one of the misunderstandings of Space Force when it was brought to be. People were making fun of it and making memes
I
like,
did myself, yeah.
aliens are coming and this and that. But the whole entire purpose, and if you read his whole proposal of what it was to protect against Chinese, Russian influenced
It's a good
cyber
idea.
attacks.
My problem with the Space Force was that the agency already existed. That's NASA.
Yeah.
He didn't need. He wanted to be credited with inventing his own branch of the military.
Yeah.
Did NASA need to maybe co-join with the Air Force and create a division of the Air Force that NASA coordinated with? Yeah, you didn't need to create a whole separate branch. But yes, protection of orbital assets is a big deal.
Really big
going
deal.
forward.
Yeah.
Especially all the stuff we talked about the internet.
Yeah.
Stuff's all floating up there, working on those satellites.
Yep. The cloud, it's up there.
So, and yeah, thematically as we go forward, okay, again, confluence. The dissolving of the family unit is another theme for me.
Yeah.
So we have all these technological changes that have enabled all these personality changes that are enabling all these societal changes.
Yeah.
And we see this erosion of the traditional family unit.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, that's because you've lost your moral values. And it's because we're now different people. I'm not a different people. And I have a very traditional family unit. My generation is busy saying, you're 29. Why are you not married yet?
Yeah.
Is something wrong with you?
Yeah.
And the fact is that people don't do that as much now.
No.
Because we grew up with the idea that you became an adult, you got married, you had some kids. That's the theme.
Yeah.
And it's baked into you, and you just kind of lemming-like mindlessly march off the cliff and do it.
I think that for me, at least personally, that's one of my biggest things when I was growing up was always I want to get married. I want to have a family. I want to, have that career. And then as I got probably in my 20s, I started to say, I don't want to take a mortgage out. I don't want to feed these kids and all this and everything. I don't have any kids. I'm not married. I'm just saying,
Right.
Hypothetically, that I don't want to do these things, that I'm actually very quite comfortable with my life where it is. I can sustain myself, as I've proven to myself, even in dire situations where it looked like I wasn't going to have anything to keep surviving with.
Right.
I got through that. And it just becomes comfortable for us, I think, to the point of where, one, we have become busier as society. It has gone busier. You're doing so much to the point where you are in that traditional household family that you now have the husband and the wife working. And if you're in very dire needs, you have the husband, the wife, and probably the children working to at least keep the household up. And that just seems like way too much. Now you throw a single person into that category. I don't have time to date.
Right.
I don't have time to get any of this done because I'm consistently either at work or doing other projects that I'm interested in. And where do you draw the line of putting one above the other? Plus, I think it's harder for people to actually meet other than the internet, especially with the online dating.
Yeah, I don't agree with you there. It's easier for people to meet.
I mean, in person. I'm saying
it's easier to meet in person. You just don't do it.
Well, I think it's the social anxiety of approaching from a man's perspective a woman, or from even a woman's perspective
and
of
to be
being
fair,
approached.
in my days, we said that's what bars are for.
Yeah.
But again, there's a difference between the way you are built in your brain and what is important to you as you grew up than for me.
Yeah.
And the next generation, it's even different. I mean, these things are slowly moving us forward, and we get uncomfortable with them when we say, you're wrong because you didn't get married before you were 30.
Yeah.
Or at all.
Yeah.
Or whatever. The family unit has slowly been evolving for all this time. I mean, in the 1700s, your wife was a piece of property. Her dad passed the title of her on to you. If you're a Duggar, it's still that way. And then we slowly go forward, and then a woman actually becomes a person.
Yeah.
but you can't vote.
Yeah.
She doesn't work.
Yeah.
And we've moved out of that paradigm into the next one. Do you want to go back to 1710 and live?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Were those people like looking at, if they could look at today, would they be comfortable? No, they
No,
wouldn't.
absolutely
It would be
not.
outrageous to them.
Yeah.
Society has fallen apart.
Mm.
So we're always thinking society's falling apart because our version of it fell apart.
Yeah.
Your version of it is the one that's going to be around in 40 years because we'll all be cake.
Yeah.
But it's always going to shift. It's always going to change. And that's the biggest thing. I had my midlife crisis in my 50s as scheduled.
Yeah.
And I started examining. That sounds very intentional. I started feeling sorry for myself and looking at all this stuff.
Yeah.
And just really went through everything about who I was and what I believed in and why I wanted to be there. It was where I stopped going to church.
Mm.
Because I realized that in my heart, I did not actually believe that there was a God.
Mm.
I never asked him for anything. I never called on him for anything. And I didn't, at heart, think I was going to get anything from him. Didn't really bother looking at whether or not he actually existed.
Yeah.
But recognized that I clearly didn't think he did because he didn't factor into my life at all.
Mm.
I went to the church. I did all this stuff. I believed all this stuff, I guess. I said all this stuff.
Yeah.
But when I really examined it close, I realized I wasn't counting on him for nothing. And that's why my life was the same.
Mm.
My wife is the opposite.
Yeah.
It's become clearer to my wife. But for me, I just had to stop faking it and just got really honest with myself about who I was. And in that examination, started looking at a lot of other stuff.
Mm.
And that's kind of where I've eventually come to the end of that process. And now I can kind of see it all from this way back perspective where I can take it all in from 1961 up to today and say, it's just the normal noises in here.
Mm.
This is what happens.
Mm.
The 50s people were outraged with my brothers.
Mm.
And the 70s people were outraged. Well, not as much to that extent because the 70s were a mess. But, as we move forward, we look back on those old fogies and their stupid ideas.
Yeah.
Dave Thomas, founder of Wendy's, grew up in the Depression, didn't have a place to live, ended up, some restaurant people took him in and he slept in the restaurant and he worked for them 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
Dave Thomas went on to work for a guy named Harlan Sanders who just had a little chicken recipe system he was selling to people and he wasn't doing a very good job, and Dave Thomas took it over and he'd go to a place, show it to them, and if they bought it, he'd go back and he'd stay with them for like a month and teach them the system so that he made sure the chicken was right.
Yeah.
That became Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Dave Thomas owned a big chunk of it.
Yeah.
Worked really hard for a lot of years, had a family.
Yeah.
Sold the chicken business, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Sold his chunk of it off. Made a lot of money. Was a millionaire. Didn't retire.
Yeah.
His family said later, we didn't see much of Dad.
Yeah.
Because he started Wendy's.
Yeah.
His formative years were in need and want. They were broke. You worked tirelessly because all you wanted to do was survive. And that informed every other part of his life to the point where he couldn't enjoy himself unless he was working. He couldn't buy into all that family stuff. He had to work. It was his thing.
Yeah.
He wasn't wrong. It's just him. It's the way he was formed.
Yeah.
When you make a thing, that's what it is. I'm made like me.
Yeah.
Information has turned me in different directions, but I still I'm not able to completely break free from that mold. And as we move forward, I have inbuilt systemic prejudices that I have that I work with to say, okay, that's a part of something that, I really need to stop doing, but I automatically do it.
Yeah.
It's my thing.
Yeah.
You're not that. You've leapfrogged over some of that. You're caught up in some other of it.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to leapfrog you. The American family unit is going along with that.
Yeah.
So for me, I actually did judge my kids on their life status. What kind of a job do you have? What kind of jobs are pretty transitory these days.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where you don't get with a company, stay with them for 30 years, take a retirement from them, and then carry 2 retirements into retirement.
Yeah.
I knew guys in the Army, they did their 30 years. They got out, they started a second job. They'd worked there for 20 years and retire with 3 retirements.
Yeah.
And they're probably doing very well now. That's kind of not something that exists in as many places as it used to.
Yeah.
Ties back in, confluence,
Confluence.
to this whole system of I'm not a company. I'm a system for making my stock get more valuable all the time, and that's impossible.
Yeah.
There has to be an end. There has to be a limit. So Mary Barra from GM says,
Mary,
we're not going to make any cars in the United States anymore.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Because Americans aren't valuable to you? That's where companies need to have that founder, because a founder knows what he's about, and that's what the company's about.
Yeah.
GM's not about anything except making their profit, enough, making their growth enough so that people will not buy out of their stock.
Yeah.
Well, what is that good? Who wants that?
Yeah.
How does that help anybody?
Yeah.
If GM started out everything with a simple statement of, we're an American company, we're going to employ Americans to the extent that it's possible, that would be a step where they'd say, yeah, okay, let's get the mayor of Detroit to give us X number of acres downtown. We'll wipe it, we'll pay for it, we'll set it back to rights, and we'll do something good there.
Yeah.
But they don't feel like there's an investment need. They ruined the city.
Yeah.
But they won't fix it.
No. And that's where I had issues when I worked for them. That it was one, I don't see how a company that is bailed out by the American government can then still, and this isn't even a China thing at this point. This is just a whole, where does your loyalty lie?
It would go against your conscience. Where does their loyalty lie?
Not with the
stockholders.
I was going to say not with American people and the people that have backed them, because who are the people that are buying their products? American-made people from the 50s and the 60s that are around. I couldn't tell you how many times I had customers come in, especially in this conservative area, that would tell me, your price is way too high, but guess what? I'm going to buy it because it's either you or Chevy. I don't want a Chevy this time.
Right.
And I don't buy foreign products. Little to know that it's all assembled foreignly.
Yeah.
And most of it wasn't even assembled in America anymore.
Right.
When they found out the Buick Envision was assembled in Mexico, they damn near flipped their lid.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't buy it. And it's just like, well, are you going to appease the people that have supported you and made you into the money-making mongrel that you are today? Or
they're not going to, because they don't need to.
They don't need to.
They need to appease their stockholders.
Yeah.
And if Americans are mad at them and stop buying GMs, that'll get somebody's attention.
Yeah.
But people aren't going to do that.
No.
Elon Musk, on the other hand, owns a company where, again, he's the founder.
Yep.
The company is what he is.
Yeah.
So what's the solution? Ford decided, people don't want sedans. We're not going to make sedans.
Yeah.
People don't want sedans because you made crappy ones forever.
Yeah.
You made one good car. You made a Mustang, and now you're just going to call everything a Mustang.
And now everything's a Mustang.
That'll fix the problem. I was talking to my wife yesterday about Sears.
Yeah. And how many of them there used to be.
How do you lose a business when you're number one and you started out in the old world equivalent of online sales?
Yeah.
You were a catalog business.
Yep.
And then catalog business faded and you started becoming a mall business. And you've watched that transition from being a remote retailer to being a store retailer, and you're paying somebody $8-10 million a year who doesn't recognize that you need to become an online retailer again. And how do you fail that badly?
Yeah.
Turn around and fix the problem by buying Kmart.
Yeah.
A retailer that was so terrible that they were busy divesting stuff like Rite Aid that they'd bought, Builders Square.
Yep.
Just mistake after mistake after mistake. The number two. So the number one retailer retails themselves out of business by just sticking to their guns.
Yep.
Then buys the number two retailer, and they're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And together, they decide that the best path forward is to do more.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, those people should give their money back.
Yeah.
I made $10 million a year from Sears. I should give them at least half of that back because I really screwed the company over.
Yeah.
But
we don't look
does
at
that.
it like that.
Nobody does it. Steve Jobs came back into Apple, and it was pretty horrible after he left. And it got to the point where they didn't even know if they were going to make it a month.
Yeah.
And he came back in, and because he knew what the company should be, he wasn't trying to guess or reinvent anything. He's like, this is what Apple is.
Yeah.
Put them back on their feet.
Yeah.
And then proceeded to go absolutely bonkers by looking at good ideas and having total control.
Yep.
And red lighting ideas he thought was good and insisting on high quality, even if it meant he was going to establish a super high price for whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
And began to say, well, the price is part of the point.
Yeah.
And you're still using Apple products to this day,
Still to this
even
day.
though they cost too much. So he wasn't wrong. But
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that, you know, is missing now, unless you're in a startup.
Yeah.
And the arc of startups is they start, they do good, they charge a premium price. Sooner or later, at least 3 other companies came along and make something that's almost as good and costs less.
Yeah.
And then the wheels start to fall off the wagon unless that founder has a second card in there, if he can do something else. But what usually happens is they get 7 shades of desperate and start changing things, and then the whole thing falls out of the sky.
Yep.
With car companies, that can't happen as much. But what we're doing right now is we're seeing that the modern economy causes you, because of the way it's incentivized,
Yeah.
to have less choice.
Yeah.
There's fewer sedans now available, and the ones that are mostly Korean,
Yeah.
Japanese.
Japanese, Korean. You
Yeah.
have a couple that are European still, but that's very few and far.
Primarily, you know, when you're looking at choice in cars, you're looking at, you know, something from Korea or something from Japan. Not a lot of American stuff out there.
Yeah.
Because they've all just run away from the business. Chrysler, I don't even know who they are anymore. Stellaire.
They changed their name, so it's Stellaire. And that was the thing. It wasn't a buyout or anything. They just changed their name.
Because they're trying to reinvent the wheel. It's the same thing everybody does.
Well, they rebranded so many times that they have to kind of, I think, say, look, this is who we actually are, because you had Dodge, who had the Ram truck, so it was a Dodge Ram, and then in 2015, 2016, you start seeing the Dodge logo with these 2 slashes, and I'm like, well, what happened to the Ram? And then you see a commercial for just Ram. Doesn't say Dodge, but it's still the Dodge Ram. But now Ram is its own brand. Dodge is its own brand. Jeep is its own brand. So and it just keeps
And right now they're keeping what used to be Fiat afloat.
Yep.
And that's why they're Stellaire now, because apparently Fiat has a poisonous name in Europe, and, you know, we like Dodge trucks, apparently, and less, though.
Yeah.
There's less there.
Yeah.
Name all the cars that Dodge makes in the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not very many of them anymore.
No. You have the Charger, and that's really all I can think of.
But everything looks the same, so it almost doesn't matter. And this is the thing, is if you could just start a car company, and it would be difficult to do at this point, but if you could just start a car company, I mean, all you have to do is be unusual.
Yeah.
You know, be
Elon Musk.
thoughtfully unusual. And there you go.
Yeah.
And that's why he's smart, is because he just says, hole in the market, and he drives there with elaborate detail.
And that's the thing. The man is a genius. He is, I don't want to say like a big influence in my life, but even just listening to his little pep talks on what you should do when you get up in the morning, there's something different that I would more so believe him and just the way that he presents things than if I would listen to Dave Ramsey or, you know, somebody else.
I'd look at his track record. He's a guy that does stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of motivational speakers, I don't know, what do you do?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a motivational speaker. Yeah, okay.
Well, what did you do? Like Tony Evans.
What have you accomplished?
I don't get Tony Evans.
Like for me, if you've got a car company that survived against all prediction, and you make something totally weird, and you just continue to do a good job at it, and continue to overcome obstacles and work with it, that's impressive. I'll take some advice from you.
Yeah.
But for me, again, a lot of this stuff is driven by, you're nobody now. You don't even know who you are. Who is GM? We don't know.
Yeah.
We're just a big company that sells stocks.
Yeah.
That's what they're in. The place where we work, I say to the boss often, who are we? What is our belief system?
Yeah.
If this happens, what are we going to do? And I think everybody needs to know that, in business in particular.
Well, it's part of integrity too.
And stop saying you love your customers.
Yeah.
You don't even know them.
Yeah.
You don't love them. Be honest with them. I'm honest with a lot of mine. I say, we know what we're getting from you. We're getting money, and we like it. So I want to let you know what you're getting from us in exchange for money.
Yeah.
It's not because I care about you or whatever. I do. I don't want you to be angry with me.
Yeah.
You know, I want to have a good relationship where you get what you want, I get what I want, and we understand when something goes wrong, because something inevitably goes wrong, what the procedure is and that we will follow through.
Yeah.
Because we care about being in business,
Yeah.
and that's how you stay in business.
Because any old company can go out and do what we do.
Everybody says they love you.
And they'll say, we care and we'll take care of you. And
Yep.
then they don't. I think you can see that with a bunch of the corporation people that do what we do, that are trying to just sell the most cheapest downgrade of things and put it in and try and pass it along as premium.
Right.
And then 3 years later, you got a problem and people wonder why.
And we address that a lot of times. People will say, well, big box store is cheaper. And I say, yes, they are.
They are.
And I can't tell you that that's any other way that's going to be.
Yeah.
We don't feel like that matters over the long term.
No.
But, if you think so, then go ahead.
Yeah.
And you usually see them back later, because usually people expect things to be at a certain level.
Yeah.
And when they're not,
It's kind of where it is.
that's the way it is. And they'll say, I learned my lesson from that mistake. That failure has taught me that there's a level, doesn't have to be the top level.
Yeah.
There's a level where your investment is solid.
Yeah.
And there's a level where you're just kind of throwing it away,
Mm.
and for the learning process.
Yeah.
I'll pay a lot of money for an education, and that's why, sometimes I'll do stuff for myself.
Hmm.
Because I'll either learn how to do it or I'll learn to not do it.
Yeah.
Either way, I learn something.
Yeah.
So I'll try stuff, any amount of times.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to paying the cheapest, I usually look at everything, figure what's the top, what's the bottom, and try to hit that sweet spot in value that's usually about 3/4, 2/3 of the way up.
Yeah.
I won't buy the top thing all the time. I'll learn about the system and figure out where my compromises are and make a decision.
Yeah.
So if you give people the information rather than platitudes,
Yeah.
they'll usually make a choice that's okay.
Yeah. And I think people respect that too when you're being open with them and saying, look, like, we can't do this for you.
Yeah.
They can. We
Yeah.
won't. And there's a reason behind that. And then showing them, and then they actually kind of respect that a little bit more, and will either, one, change their mind on some things or just go through with what they originally planned.
I shop like, that myself.
Yeah.
I'd rather somebody just told me about something, and I'll ask people some questions. And if it becomes clear rapidly that they don't really have a good grip on the concept,
Yeah.
I'll stop talking to them about it and
Yeah.
just go figure it out for myself.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I tell people all the time, we don't have a sales process. We have an information process.
Yeah.
I'll give you the information.
Yep.
You're the adult. You can make the decision.
Yep.
I'll just tell you what the ramifications of your decision is. And I think business needs to be more people forward like that. Here's what our car does.
Yeah.
Okay. It's all, well, look at it. It does, it has these buttons and doohickeys and whatever,
Yeah.
and nobody comes out and says our car will last twice as long as the other guys because we didn't make it with flimsy.
Yeah.
That's not a thing.
Yeah.
Another generational change. When I was a kid, a car lasted you for, 15 years. And when it went bad, you got a new transmission.
Yep.
Because that's your car.
Yeah.
You're going to drive it till it explodes.
Yep.
That's the end of it.
Yeah.
And now, they're kind of disposable, throwaway.
Now you're
sort of.
mass producing. You can get anything at a touch
And maybe
of a
that's
hand.
just a generational hop from what I'm used to.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just something I need to deal with, where these kinds of things are transitory, and
Yeah.
you need a car that has all the modern lane keeper and, and that's a generational
Oh, man.
change,
But do you know what's funny, though? That stuff was invented for the generation of the 30s and 40s people that are still alive today. Because those little gadgets that are on there.
That stuff was invented because some engineer thought, wow, look what I can do. And marketing thought it was a great idea.
Not even that. It was a federal safety regulation that they had to put in when they had to go through all these emission things and go through. They had to start developing safety aspects to the vehicle to help older drivers, because they were noticing that they're in the demographic of the what was it? I think it was like age 67 and above, were more fatal accidents happening in residential areas.
I'm suspicious that it probably saved more 18-year-olds trying to eat pizza and look at Facebook than anybody else. But yeah, and it's probably not a terrible thing.
No. The fact that it actually will move the steering wheel and put you back on the road, I think that's cool.
Scary.
I think it's cool.
See, the opposite. I see that Ford commercial where the car parks itself, and I'm like, the day I let that happen will be the day I've passed out in the front seat.
Well, that's the problem, because they don't tell you all about how that works. I tried to have a Buick LaCrosse park itself one time and almost went into the whole entire row of cars that were behind me, because you have to have some element of control still with the brake.
It looks like a horror story up there at the level of Spot, the robot dog. Yeah,
Rolling around and
patrolling
roaming
the park.
around.
patrolling parks in Seoul, Korea, to make sure people are wearing masks. That's what Spot's doing in Seoul.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yeah, that's a whole different topic.
have a tranquilizer dart on his back the next time he does it, and then after that it'll be a BB gun, and then he'll start tear gas.
Actually, tear gas and everything.
We're just gonna one step our way into the Terminator.
Yeah. Or iRobot.
But we're headed somewhere with all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And technology is kind of driving it.
Yeah.
But it's driving it by putting ideas out in front.
Well, I think that's the vast. What am I trying to say? Forefront of it all is because it's literally integrated in almost everything now. I mean, it's not just segregated to a phone or a TV or a computer. I mean, it's in everything now. Your oven, your washer, your dryer, your doors, your security systems. I mean, anything really. If
Duran
you think
Duran
about
had a song in '83 called '93. Sorry. Too Much Information. And that was before the internet really took off. They were just talking about satellite television. Now just being bombarded by all these visuals and images from everywhere. And how much worse is it now?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't really want to know what you had for dinner.
Yeah.
And yet I've been that guy once who took a picture of my food, and I caught myself right in the middle of it and said, this is just terrible.
Yep.
And I still did it.
Yeah.
But that's the thing.
Yeah.
There's so much information out there, and people don't feel peace anymore.
No.
You know, growing up in New Hampshire after I left the city there, from 10 to 18, I was in a small town in New Hampshire that had 800 people in the summer, 400 in the winter, because all the summer people went back to Massachusetts. It was emptiness.
Yeah.
I roamed around the mountains. I played in streams because there's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Quiet was normal.
Yeah.
I joined the Army. That was one of the hardest things, was because just the constant cacophony of noises from everybody everywhere, and stereo wars and people yelling at each other in the parking lot, and the constant people against people kind of thing that happens when the same thing I get in the city now. It still gets me. It's just all that conflict constantly circulating, and people just get used to it, and they get this armor where they're like, and they scream at each other in the street and stuff. And for me, that's just like the worst thing possible.
I think one of the funner
It's one of the funneriest things,
but one of the things I get joy out of in doing what Jen and I do is you get these tough guy and girl personas, and the second you ask them, do you want a hug, they light up like a child. And just smile, and like that's where like I see the light kind of moving into the darkness portion of everything, because everyone has masked themselves to cooperate with, well, this is how you're supposed to act in society. You don't show any emotion, you don't show any type of vulnerability, and then the one thing that people want the most is actually vulnerability, and they just want that hug.
Or they're used to being completely ignored.
You know,
and you're at least recognizing that they're human there. Who, it's one of those things for me, and I've done it myself. Do it all the time. You ignore what's you filter. You filter people, and you categorize them to make yourself feel better about ignoring them. Homeless people are all this. That way I don't have to look at them and feel bad. And still you slip that guy $10 and you think, well, why did I do that later? And it's like, it was a guilt reaction because you are ignoring the problem. I don't know what the problem exactly gets solved by, but there's a problem. I mean, clearly we have a people living in a shelter problem in this country. It's everywhere, and it's small places, big places, you name it. Some of that can, again, be confluence from people who are coming unmoored from traditional families. It used to be you took care of grandpa because nobody else was going to, so you had these giant extended families with generations and generations of people who were all living together in sort of this communal self-support thing. We had to start Social Security because that fell apart. And that was not surprisingly during the Depression that they started that. They're like, look, we have to take care of old people, and we have to do it some other way because their families are just booting them out. I might be slightly wrong about that, but that's the gist of it. And now we moved into the next phases of that, where it's like, again, what is the job of government? and you go back to the Declaration of Independence, and they talk about why they wanted to separate from England and what they think their rights before God were to do so. They basically laid out their case, and they said, this is how we feel, this is what the guy's done, this is why we think it's okay. Very well written. Part of the thing that they said in there was that it was their feeling that people were willing to tolerate a government that wasn't great as long as it wasn't horrible, and that they wouldn't make a change casually unless it was super important, but that the foundational idea of the United States was that people had the right to change their government as they saw fit to best affect their happiness. We're not doing that. That's the thing for me that's missing. People talk about the Second Amendment all the time. Number one, it was an amendment. It was an amendment for a reason. And the point is that if the Founding Fathers felt one way, you know, they also felt like we should be able to change our government as we see fit. And what we need to look at, again, it goes back to that corporate thing. Who are we? What are we going to do? I said a long time ago, okay with me if we say we're closed and we're not going to be the melting pot and we're not taking a lot of immigrants and stuff like that. That's okay. Let's decide it intentionally. Let's take that plaque off the Statue of Liberty and then go forward that way. In agreement that that's our thing. But we don't, you know, so...
We don't change to, I think, adapt to where we are. I mean, for me right now, America is free and freer than a lot of other places in the world when it comes to different freedoms that we have. But, you know, looking at it now, it just seems that we are just the giant billboard epicenter of where things start. And you see a lot of people still wanting to come here because they recognize the opportunity of how good it is here to start what they need to do. But, you know, as a quote unquote American growing up in America, I was blessed enough to be born here. So I can be called an American. And looking at what the American dream is, or what it was at least, has now just turned, I think, into corporate America. It's just one big corporation to me.
Well, the dream that you were told was somebody else's generational dream. You know, and again, we're trading those in, and we're changing everything. And it gets uncomfortable for older people when younger people start saying, "Well, these are my pronouns." You know, it's just it's the next shift. I mean, things are going to get uncomfortable for older people when younger people change things. But right now, we're kind of hanging on to the vestiges of this 1950s sort of mentality. The hippies tried to break it, and eventually they said, "Yeah, well, it's not working. There's money." They made a couple of big changes. They did get the war stopped, but a lot of them went into government and kind of became the problem. You know, nobody wakes up and becomes Adolf Hitler. They do it one step at a time. And a lot of these people, Clintons, you sell a little piece of yourself every time to get a little further, and the next thing you know, you got nothing left. You become something different as part of the process. Politics is a whole different thing, how that works. But I know when you govern an engine, what you're doing is restricting its range in order to get a longer life out of it. So you don't let it rev as fast as it wants to. You keep it reasonable so the engine lasts longer. And for me, that informs government. What is the job of government? Government is the job of restricting some freedoms for the group whole. Everybody can't have all the freedom in the world. So we like to use that term freedom. But what we should be doing is saying, you know, well, you can move anywhere you want. You can change jobs. You can leave the country if you want. You have a lot of freedom. But the whole point of government is you can't do whatever you want. You know, and people who put those libertarian "don't tread on me" flags up and stuff, well, they're driving on roads that were stolen from people. Because they took the land to make the roads. And then they took another 8 feet and gave it to the telegraph companies to put up poles and wires, and the Rural Electrification Act made America the #1 electrified country in the world. But it basically gave 8 feet of everybody's property to these companies. That's why they can come and shave my tree and wipe out half of it and just say, "Tough luck, buddy, it's your problem." But again, we wouldn't have the infrastructure we have if they didn't do it. The whole point of government is you're curtailing, you're giving away some freedom. And there is no place in the world that's free.
Yeah.
I mean, you're always giving up some freedom unless you're living on an island by yourself. And you've given up some freedom by living on an island by yourself.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, is the exchange worth it?
Yeah.
It's the same as dealing with Microsoft.
Yeah.
Is the exchange worth the result? You have to judge those things on your own and decide based on what it is you want out of life. But the idea that, oh, we should be free, and then you're complaining because they didn't plow the snow. Left hand's kind of contradicting the right hand there. So thematically, who are we?
Yeah.
Who are we as a country? Who are you as a company?
Yeah.
You know, who are you as a person? These concepts all are rooted in something that's changed now. And, you know, so for me with GM, if they're leaving the country, that's fine.
Yeah.
You treat them like anybody else.
Yeah. But don't posterize them as your American-made company.
Not allow them to say they're an American company.
Yeah.
Headquartered in America, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, they're nothing to us at this point. And for me, any company that makes a decision that we're going to go back to being an American manufacturer, however they accomplish that, you can call yourself an American company.
Then you can go ahead and do that.
I mean, Apple hiding all their money overseas. I would just be, bring your money back, or we're going to tax you on all of it, or you know, something has to be done.
Yeah.
And some of it's me being outraged and stuff that's probably not even legal or fair.
Yeah.
But for me, again, Americans get paid more money, so they go find somebody cheaper to do it.
Yeah.
Everybody says that's wrong and buy American, and then they go to Walmart. Okay. It's painful to invest in more expensive things because they're made by people here.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly interested in doing that in some cases. Most flooring is made somewhere else. The flooring that's made in America is only made in America because you can't ship it on container freight. Roll goods. Can't put them on a container freight, so they're made in America. We're starting to see some stuff being made in America because of the tariffs and because of the slowdown during the coronavirus and getting things shipped. But, you know, I don't know if that's going to go forward much more or not.
Yeah.
But the Japanese are sitting there saying the same thing.
Yeah.
They've had the same problems. They were that production powerhouse. They have an aging population of working people and a younger generation that's largely struggling with emotional issues, and a lot of people aren't working, and they're you know, they're in basements somewhere playing video games, and they're probably at the forefront of that.
Yeah.
Birth rate declining, the whole 9 yards. What's the solution?
Yeah.
And on the one hand, you know, the population that's coming here that wants to do, well, not wants to do, is willing to do menial labor, we're demonizing.
Yeah.
I lived in California for a couple of years. In Salinas, or close to Salinas. There's a Monterey, but close to Salinas, where the lettuce fields are. I'll tell you what, it isn't people who, you know, live in houses close by who are picking that lettuce. It's people who are driving there in their cars, and there'd be 20, 30 cars in the field, and they just sleep there overnight and then pick the lettuce, and then they move on to the next farm.
Yeah.
We've made that problem happen.
Yeah.
So to suddenly be outraged about it kind of surprises me.
Well, I think that's why I think that goes back to what my statement was about corporate America and corporatized America. You know, we institutionalized everything to the point of where you have every single college person coming out of college thinking that they're going to be in their field that they went for, which is mainly dominated because you had people in the 70s and 80s go to that same field, and it's not as flourishing as it is anymore. And that we think that because we live in America, we are deserving to be in a high position, that everybody is the CEO, everybody should be a manager.
We were told if you go to college,
and
you'll have a great life.
You'll have a great life. Yeah. And that was a lie.
I was told the same thing.
And I was told the same thing, and I'm so glad that I got out of it when I did, or I'd be hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt.
Yeah.
And wouldn't be in my field. You know, and I know that. I have so many friends that have gone to college that aren't working in their field. They're working in a field that they could have done straight out of high school. And I think more and more people are becoming wiser to that. Trade schools, I definitely highly recommend. I would say learn a trade, if anything, even if it's just to learn the trade and you don't do anything with it. At least you have something in your back pocket later on in life. But the whole institutionalized, the get a good education and then you'll be this business owner or this, and you know, we realize, well, that's a lie now. Even with something like doing this, I like doing this because I like doing this. I like
Right.
talking to people. It's something that was an interest of mine. I didn't want to get into it for the longest time because there's 900,000 podcasts out there that anybody could find, and the fact that someone random in Wyoming would stumble upon this and watch it and like it is a 1 in 100 chance. It's not
Right.
it's not very plausible, but we're told that we can do anything we want to when we're a kid, and I think that's that institutionalized and not the American dream concept, but the institutionalized concept of you can do anything you want to, and we have to stop telling children that because it's not true. If you want to be a doctor when you're a kid and you work your ass off to be a doctor, your brain capacity might not be kept up enough to be a doctor as much as you learn. I mean, you may not have, if you want to be a surgeon, you may not have the steady hands. There might be something biologically wrong with you that has natural shaking hands or things of that nature.
I think people naturally kind of understand that you have the possibility to be, but for me, school has been predicated, and apparently it was before me because other people have said the same thing.
Yeah.
On this idea that was post World War II. That if you go to college, your life will improve.
Yeah.
When I first started working for, I worked for a company that's currently out of business, Home Quarters Warehouse. Home Quarters Warehouse would not let you be a manager without at least an associate's degree in anything.
In anything.
I mean, that was their rule to be management.
Yeah.
Over the 10-year span, I left them for 2 years and went to Staples, and then I eventually left them and went back after a while. But at the end of that 10 years, I went back and was a manager with no college degree.
Yeah.
Because they had decided just to get the best people for the job, and I worked my way into it in like a month and a half.
Yeah.
It was too late for them.
Yeah.
They were gone.
Yeah.
Since then, that has shifted a little bit.
A lot. I became a manager when I was 17 years old and had the responsibility of running 2 stores as a 17-year-old.
This is part of that generational shift.
Yeah.
But now all those associate's degrees, well, they don't matter anymore.
No.
You just got worked out of the market.
Yep.
Again, it's the confluence of people recognizing, let's get the best person for the job and not just somebody who went to community college necessarily.
Yeah.
But that's the confluence of these idea clashes as we're seeing generational shifts in thought patterns.
Yeah.
And it's big
Yeah.
because it's big changes. It's big ideas because it's ideas that, it used to be you'd have an idea in your people group, and then you'd have an idea in your state, and then you'd have an idea in your country. Why has the United States got 1,800 different kinds of marijuana laws?
Yeah.
I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Colorado, California, these guys have been doing this for years.
Yep.
Why is this a debate we're having?
Why is it so hard to have this conversation in a manner of it's not a drug? We can't bring that up without, and I think part of that's Big Pharma owns a lot of verbs and a lot of words that you can't say.
I think the biggest thing I've heard is this generational idea that you either are for it or against it.
Yeah.
And that why it changed in government is because people from the 70s are now in government.
Yeah.
And they're less against it.
Yeah.
But for me, it comes back to this whole idea of, do we know who we are? So in Colorado and in Washington and in California, they all have something that the rest of the country, a few others do, but mostly we don't have it here for sure.
Yeah.
A proposition system. In all 3 of those states, you can get a bunch of signatures and put something on a ballot.
Yep.
And if people vote for it, then it has to be made law.
Yep.
And that's how they got marijuana changed.
Yeah.
Why don't we have a national referendum system where we can put forth things, get them voted on, and therefore bypass all the money we know is subverting Congress.
Yeah.
And we know is fueling political agendas. And again, it comes back down to Microsoft. They're incentivizing you in a behavior pattern.
Well, to go one way, one party, one train of thought.
So for me, if we want to at least go forward with less Sturm and Drang, let's decide who we are. And the step on deciding who we are that makes the most sense is a national and statewide, evenly administered referendum system where people can say, this is what we believe. Let the Supreme Court duke that out.
Yeah.
But that at least it can be known. I think that if I was going to run for Senate, I would survey people.
Are you going to run for Senate?
No, I'd be disqualified on several counts, including lack of lunacy. But people run for office and they always say, this is what I believe in.
Yeah.
If I was going to run for office, I'd be like, what do you people
What do you believe in? Yeah.
If I'm representing you,
Yeah.
because they're not,
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's been proven throughout the last 2 elections, of where we are in society. And you know me, I don't identify as a certain party. I kind of listen to both sides where I'm at. My voting choices were very all over the place in the past 2 times that I was allowed, well, 3 times that I was allowed to vote. So it's something of where, look, because I think we're at a point in society where we don't even know what we stand for. Like,
it's hard to say.
It's something where you think you stand for this and you'll get crucified for it, so you don't even mention it, or you stand for something that you really don't know anything about. You didn't get all the facts on it. It's just the trending thing to stand for.
And some young person corrects you.
Yeah.
Which is the thing that for me, I would say something and my children would correct me, and I'd look it up after a little bit of argument, and they'd have been right.
Yeah.
And that's when I started getting my education, and things are different.
Yeah.
And people think about things in a different way, and
things are changing, society's changing, and it's not that it's something new, it's something that is newer than what was.
So there's the thematic angst from the group that's being left.
Pull a little bit closer.
And there's this enthusiasm in the group that's being moved into.
Yeah.
You have to do everything we want. You must recognize everything I say and do as valid. It's like you can't be uncomfortable with it. No, we are.
Yeah.
It's not our thought process.
And that's fine.
On the other hand, it's a generational handoff.
Yeah.
And I saw it in the 60s.
Yeah.
It was the same thing. And years later, those families kind of got back together, but it was kind of one of those things where something snaps between the two groups.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing it now.
Yeah.
Where are we going to go? I think it's pretty clear from the last year, which has been a great year.
Yeah.
I think 2020 was the most magnificent year I've seen in a long time. Shit was happening.
Yeah.
People were outraged, and they were taken to the streets, and they were saying exactly what they thought should happen. And as just like happened in the 60s, entrenched groups got their back up, and it was bad.
Yeah.
All you have to do is watch the whole bit about the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, 68, and the trial of the Chicago 7 later.
Yeah.
Just one year almost overlays the other.
Yeah.
And when you have that kind of change, you have a group of people that really care about what happens.
Yeah.
Maybe they're wrong in some stuff, maybe they're right in some stuff, but they care.
Yeah.
So hopefully what doesn't happen is what happened last time.
Yeah.
The Might As Well Be Walking on the Sun.
Yeah.
Okay? That song describes the hippie movement and how those people kind of moved forward, and, it fell apart in the end.
Yeah.
But that the concept kind of played throughout, and I think that's what's going to happen now.
Yeah.
Things are being done wrong.
Yeah.
And you can complain, and you can do all the official channels they tell you to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes government doesn't respond till 100,000 people get out in the street and start shouting at them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you look at the other side of it, what happened at the Capitol, and it's like, you can take that too far. There's a law, there's a line, and you can let the government know what you want. You can demand they do what you want. In the end, you got to vote them out of office, not try to throw them out of office physically. And so there's the two different things for me.
Yeah.
But misinformation and disinformation fueled the whole year.
Yeah.
It was like truth was on trial. And yes, I have a horse in that race. But either way you look at it, it was the biggest clash of ideas that's happened in this country for a long time.
Yeah.
Right out in the street, played out every day.
Yeah.
And I think a little bit we discovered our soul in that process. We found a little bit about who we are. We found out about who that generation that preceded is, but then we found out the next generation, and they're really spiritually kind of right where they were in the 60s.
Yeah.
You know, this is wrong. The group gathers. They begin to be a thing, and then they begin to present that thing they are with power and say, we're going to speak the truth to power, which is a 60s saying.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what's going to happen. We're going to make changes.
Yeah.
Slow, but yeah.
Slowly but surely. My friend, I could sit here and talk to you for hours, but I got to wrap this up here for people's listening sake. But it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks
I appreciate
for having me. It's been fun.
I want you to come back because we could talk about even more stuff.
Next time we'll stick to electronics.
Nah, not even. We can go all over the place. I love when it goes all over the place. Thank you guys again so much for listening. As always, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcast and on YouTube at Wallis Production, WALLESS Production. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you all. Dave, thank you. Everyone have a good day.